If you're just tuning in now, I have Montgomery County Board of Education candidate Stephen Austin. He is running for an at-large seat on the Montgomery County Board of Education. The election is June the 2nd. It was moved back because of the coronavirus outbreak here in Montgomery County and worldwide. And Maryland is going to the polls. Early voting, Stephen, I believe, begins a week before the election.
It's still a little confusing. From what I understand, and I've seen a couple different sources of information, it's at first the Board of Elections was saying they were going to send the ballots out at the end of April, which means we may be getting them as early as this week. I've heard no later than May 15th. So once the ballots arrive, obviously you have until June 2nd. I think it have to be postmarked by June 2nd. So,
yeah,
as far as I'm concerned, the election starts any day.
Yeah. The election is, the election for you started a little early. And I want to say, the first time you were on the podcast, I had many of the candidates over to my home right here in this very room, and I'm sitting at my desk, and then we sat at a card table and did an interview. So I want to welcome you back. And for anybody who's listening as well, I want you to know that I want to give the candidates as many opportunities to talk to voters, because we are limited in time and we're limited in forums. And normally we would be doing tons of forums. And by tons, I mean at least 10 or 11, and you would get to know, you would become ultimately very friendly with your colleagues who are running alongside you. But of course, we can't do that. So this is the next best thing. In addition, I wanted to invite you, Stephen, back on the show is because you have been taking some heat. And I think that you have been taking heat in a way that is, I don't know, a bit unfair. And as a parent, and as someone who's following this race, I have done my level best to be as objective as possible. But there is a point where we have to say, as stewards of our community, as citizens, enough is enough. So I invited you back today, and I want to talk about your platform. But first, let's talk about this article that came out in Maryland Matters. It was guest commentary, and it was written by David Fishback and Karen Chenoweth. They're writers are members of One Montgomery. It's a group formed to support excellent and equitable education in Montgomery County. And Stephen, I want to dissect this, and I have to tell you, I read this article, and it was, quite frankly, it was shocking. I really felt like it was just a series of unprovoked attacks, and we're not talking just on your policies, and that's fine. They are open to scrutiny, and you got into this race understanding that, and you accepted that. Anybody who runs for office will be heavily scrutinized, but this really went a lot further in my opinion. And so let's just start. It was posted at marylandmatters.com. The name of the article is Fomenting Fear and Division in Montgomery County. And I got to say, some of this stuff that was written, it's just one personal attack after personal attack. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me just start with it's not an article, it's an opinion piece. And the person who wrote it, David Fishback, he failed to disclose that he is actually a Sunil Dasgupta supporter. So I thought that was actually really important information that people should know. Look, I mean, personally, I don't want to spend any amount of time or I want to spend the least amount of time possible explaining what I'm not, and I want to explain about what I am.
That's fair.
But let's just, two of the more egregious claims that came out of that article that I do want to address. One, some implication that I'm anti-immigrant. My wife is an immigrant. She's not a US citizen. She has a green card. I mean, that's just patently absurd. The second is that I'm homophobic. I don't want to, I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but I'll just give you a couple of examples in my life that kind of will simply call that into question. When I lived in New York City, my next door neighbor was well, both were a gay couple, and dear friends. We're still family friends with these two. And one of them is a priest at the church that we attended, and my daughter went to preschool at down in Lower Manhattan. I thought that was so great, and we were such great friends, and you know, we had a lot of spiritual conversations together. And I had this man baptize my son, and I just asked, what homophobe would do that? It's absurd. And then, you know, I think a lot of people know I went to art school before I studied computer science, and what you may not know, because I don't really like to talk about, it's not important to the race, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. I studied with a well-known feminist performance artist when I was in art school, who also happens to be gay. I'm essentially her surrogate child. We've been in touch for 20 years. I'm dear friends with her. And it's just, it's honestly infuriating that someone would ever even insinuate something like that about me, either one of those claims about me. I'm a full advocate of LGBTQ, and obviously not anti-immigrant. I mean, I'm still married. So that's kind of my take on this. And, you know, we've formulated a response piece. We've submitted it to Maryland Matters. I have not heard back from them yet, which is kind of concerning, but, you know, we'll get it out there somehow.
Yeah. Well, so. I will tell you, in the spirit of being at World Press Freedom Day, I have a lot of respect for Josh Kurtz and Maryland Matters, and I think that they are an extraordinarily decent organization. However, if for any off chance that they do not print your response, I will be happy to include it in a minordetail.com. Stephen, the attacks launched at you have primarily revolved around the foundation of your candidacy in a popular Facebook group known as the MoCo Neighbors for Local Schools. And the crux of the entire group in the organization that you have put together, and it's very, I will say incidentally, it's very difficult to assemble 50 people inside of a room, no less, to have a virtual space of almost 8,000 parents who are closely watching, I think, one of the most watched in history at Board of Education races. So look, it really is. It's interesting. So the premise of your group is to have local schools. And we continue to hear this term that if you support local schools, thereby you're racist. Racist. I've seen this all over Facebook. I have seen this all over the media. And let me tell you, this is personal. And if I get emotional about this, it's because these attacks are fundamentally disgusting, and we are tired as a community of being told by people, elitists down county, how to raise our children, how to parent. And if we think a certain way, that if we believe that if we buy a house in a specific zip code because we want our kids to attend a school that is as close as possible to our home, that is somehow wrong, then that warrants character attacks, and that warrants to be called anti-gay, to be called racist and anti-immigrant. To anybody who is listening, I want to say this: you could not be more wrong. You could not be more offensive. They aren't interested in dialogue. They want to attack you. So, right. I read this. Enough is enough. I mean, you've got people like Dan Reed from the comfort and convenience of his cozy perch in Silver Spring, calling out Jay Guan, who was in my home, who I've had the pleasure to meet, about using language because English is his second language, and he said Dan wrote colored people, and he explained it that he meant to say people of color. And you have these progressive activists and people coming after Jay Guan for an innocent syntax error. This is outlandish. Enough.
For a group who likes to point fingers about someone being anti-immigrant, I see a lot of attacks on immigrants. Now, we have a lot of Chinese nationals that are, maybe green card holders, maybe they became citizens. And, that particular tweet really hit home for me because, my wife is from Japan and I've known this woman for 25 years. And I can tell you that no matter how long a person who learns English as their second language, especially if they're translating from a pictograph language to, English, struggles with those kinds of translations. And to watch these activist groups merrily, pile on this thing, I couldn't stand by and let that happen. Now, Jay is my opponent, but he's a great guy, and I will stand by this man in some kind of mudslinging like this. And I just felt it was my duty as someone who understands how people struggle like that to call it out. And I will give the first I don't want to mention names. Dan Reed, obviously, we already did, but the first person that he retweeted actually did apologize and said thanks for pointing it out. But Dan Reed, nothing, just left it. No concern with offending people or it's just unbelievable.
I just think it's interesting and rather hypocritical for someone who has no children in the system to tell me how I should think and feel about how I should raise and parent my children. And,
yes.
And I will say this, butt out, Dan, seriously, butt out. You have absolutely zero indication or understanding how I think or how people like us think or the basics of education of how we desperately want a better education system. That's what it's all about. I am sick and tired of these character attacks. And it's not just against you. It's this progressive machine in Montgomery County. And I see them do it. They did it to David Blair. And it was unfair back in 2018. And you have a group of people who hang out on social media all day. And it seems like they get nothing done other than just complain. And they want to talk a game about how bad Republicans are and how bad the partisanship is. Yet they're the first people to rush out and inflame a conversation by attacking not only your character, but they are inflaming numerous issues. And I got to tell you, we have got to stop this. And but I have to ask you though, a couple of questions, and then I want to move on directly to your position.
Sure.
There's a lawyer that is, I guess, bringing about suit named John Garza. He's a personal injury attorney, and they are claiming that he has ties or has worked with parents and friends of ex-gays and gays and the Family Research Council and the Family Leader Network. And yes, these are conservative groups. And they wrote in this article, in other words, Mr. Austin through his internet vehicle, MoCo Neighbors, is promoting lawsuits brought by an attorney with this track record of right-wing views. So What do you want to say to that?
Well, let's just start with, they don't want to talk about the actual case, which is what I'm promoting. I've gone on public record consistently by saying I'm not a plaintiff in the case. I'm not involved directly with the case. I was not involved in choosing the lawyer. What I did, where my position is I have a problem with violations of the Open Meetings Act. I have a problem with a school board that is just completely disregards the process that they're supposed to follow in the pursuit of an activist agenda. I don't know Garza, never met him. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I mean, I raised money for a case, not for a person. And I honestly haven't even looked into the details, mostly because I got to focus on a campaign, and this is a non-partisan seat. Okay.
It doesn't seem like it when you have.
It doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't. It seems like, Stephen, that the entire Montgomery County Democratic establishment has gotten together as a machine in the back room and said, we're going to single-handedly go after this guy. One, because he has built a movement, and anybody who denies that is nuts. And this is a movement. This is a movement of parents. This is a movement of teachers. This is a movement of dedicated professionals all over the place, and not just from the confines of Silver Spring or Tacoma Park or the surrounding areas. I'm not taking advice from people who believe that they know better than I do about my children.
Yeah.
And you've raised a lot of money, and now they are attacking your donors. They want to know, you're the guy who is, I guess, one of your biggest donors. They brought up the fact that, or they said that once it said, somebody suggested that I ask you about what you think about the views of your largest campaign donor. Well, that's fine, and I'm happy to ask you that question, but I will be glad to go through every donor of your opponent's Facebook, social media, and pick up the phone and look through their Twitter accounts and ask them individually if they've ever said anything that is remotely offensive. I'm happy to do it. Hey, I just finished grad school. I've got the time.
Yeah. Well, one thing about my campaign that I've said to people from the start, again, nonpartisan, I do not make any promises to anyone in exchange for anything. Okay. That is one principle that I follow. I'm not a career politician in any way, shape, or form. I have no desire to seek higher office. No one pulls any strings with me. If you give me money, I will thank you for it, and I will use it to win this seat. I'm not giving promises out. And in fact, some of these questionnaires, I refused to fill out one from a union. And the reason why is because some of the questions sounded almost quid pro quo. Like, if we give you this endorsement, we expect you to do certain things. And I refuse to do that. So, I don't have the time to do due diligence on every single person who donates to my campaign. We have hundreds of people that have either expressed interest in donating or have donated. We raised $2,000 in the last 48 hours.
Wow.
Off of this article with zero solicitation. That shows you how angry people are about this and the lies people are telling about me in our group. But let's get back to what this really boils down to. Like you said, the sitting House Majority Leader of the state of Maryland is committing the cardinal sin of political Twitter by punching down on a nonpartisan seat of a board with 8 members and acting like I'm, Satan himself, and I'm going to come in and just completely wreck Montgomery County. Why is that? What are they so afraid of that they're coming after me with all guns blazing, even in disregard for even fear of libel or anything else? And it's that important to them. It really makes me wonder, and I can't wait to find out.
Well, look, Eric Lukey now has a lot of time on his hands after his most pitiful,
apparently,
after one of the most pitiful sessions in the history of his career as an elected official in District 14, when he pushed forward his tax scheme, and then it ultimately backfired. And then both the House, or rather the Senate leaders, looked at him and said, you have got to be crazy to want this. Eric Lukey has a lot of time on his hands. He's always been an attack dog, and it's just I don't think it's punching down in so much as it's just it's just weird. I've got to be honest, it's just weird. I've saw the Twitter tirades, and if anybody who looks at Eric Lukey and says, well, you know what, I'm really going to take his opinion. I mean, he's truly one of the biggest partisan hacks in this state, and I have no qualms about it. And I have called him out multiple times. He is an attack dog, and then he runs and scurries away with his tail between his legs, and then cries about the oversaturation of nastiness in politics. And look, if Eric Lukey wants to come on this show and talk, I am happy to talk to him. And I'm going to call him to the carpet and say, why are you doing everything that you claim to oppose, like attacking someone? I mean, we're talking about attacking a board of education candidate, a nonpartisan candidate, and putting out these grandiose edicts on Twitter about how we shouldn't vote for, about we don't want this right-wing crony. Well, you know what I say to Eric Lukey, who truly has one of the most uninspiring careers in the history of politics in Maryland, no less, that my wife, she's a registered Republican. She's not a right-wing crony. She's a working mom of two, a middle-class woman who has entire life done the right things. So when you call, and in full disclosure, my wife supports you. When you call someone a right-wing crony, you're looking at my wife, who's all but 4'11" and blonde, and telling her that she can't think on her own, and therefore she's a right-wing crony and supports Trump and all the things that come with it. That's just ludicrous, and it's offensive. And he should apologize to you.
And that's the power of this platform as well. I should mention, right? I mean, we are a truly nonpartisan group.
Yeah.
I delete comments from all ends of the spectrum. I mean, we heavily moderate the site. I always ask people, if you see something that offends you or is over the line, just let me know. I take care of it immediately. And, you know, even my internal team is probably, I think we've got 5 Democrats, 2 independents, including myself, and like 3 Republicans. And guess what? Guess what we never talk about? Trump. Like we're not talking about national politics here. We are talking about a school board that has completely disregarded the community, and that's why they're scared, and that's why we have 8,000. We're 8,000 strong. And that's why we're going to keep growing this group. This group is going to, by the time this general election comes around, this group's going to be 15, 20,000.
Now, I've seen a lot. Well, I think that's probably true. And I see a lot of comments on different threads, and I do my best to refrain. And I don't like to comment. I don't like to blow up people's feeds. There was a comment on a former Board of Education member's post today that just really struck a nerve. And she said, and I'm talking about Catherine Colleton, who said, I wish they would move someplace where they can live in their gated communities and send their kids to some private school or homeschool them. Why do they have to ruin things for the rest of us? And that is the attitude of people who think that they know better how to raise my kids. And the only thing that a lot of parents want, and that I hear from a lot of different parents as well, is that they want their kids to go to the closest school possible, because they don't want their kids sitting on a bus. And when they buy a house, there is a certain expectation of living within a certain school district. That's why people buy their houses there. And if you think that that's anything other than what it is, it's just simply false. And I hate to say it, Stephen, I have seen more and more people from the progressive wing want to use my kids as pawns in their political agendas. I'm not ready to accept that.
Yeah. And look, here's the thing, that the dirty little secret, like you said, parents want their kids in the closest school that they can attend. And that's true no matter where you live. If you live in Bethesda or Potomac, if you live somewhere else in the county, if you live up county, that's true for everyone. Now, if the school isn't good, that's a problem the Board of Education needs to fix. And guess what? They haven't done it. And that's why I'm here, because I'm not campaigning on keeping people out of certain schools. I'm campaigning on, hey, let's make the schools better for everyone. That's why my slogan says, great neighborhood schools for all. I'm all about, let's right the wrongs that the Board of Education has allowed to happen. Let's address the issues, and let's do what's in our power that's data driven, okay, that's evidence based, that we know will have positive results on closing the achievement gap, because that's all that matters, right? When the rubber meets the road, did we close the achievement gap or did we not? Now the data comes back over 50 years of moving kids around, and it's emphatic. It does not close the achievement gap. Our own data validates this. You can look at the ERS report. I'm more than happy to put it. I'll post it on my campaign site, which is public to everyone. Stephen Austin for BOE. There's a slide in there that shows high farms, meaning high poverty kids, perform about the same no matter what level of poverty the mix of the school is. But low poverty students, there's actually somewhat seemingly correlated outcome that the performance actually declines. So, I mean, like, we should be fixing that. And it's not going to be fixed by moving a kid from one school where he may have supports, he may have, you know, extra resources, because we pay 40% more per student as a school district for the focus schools than the non-focus schools. So why would we take a kid out of a school that's getting 40% more funds for him or her and move them to a school that has none of those supports and expect that for a different outcome? What we should, the Office of Legislative Oversight report raised some serious questions about whether or not those extra funds are reaching the kids in an effective manner. When I'm on that board, that's the first question I'm gonna ask. Is that true? And if it is, why? And I wanna hold people accountable to that. Because if that is the biggest travesty this progressive school district could possibly be doing, is shortchanging the kids that we allegedly are doing our best to help. And I guarantee you, if you go into those immigrant communities and you ask, because they've done it, they want their kids at the nearest school too. And so this is not a rich or poor thing. This is not a race thing. This is a parent thing. And I've told people this. I think it's kind of funny, and I'll let you go on the next question. But you know, we have a student member of the board, and that's great. We should have a student member. I have a couple questions on whether or not they should be chairing committees and certain things like that. But okay, yes, we should have student representation. There's no requirement right now that any other adult board member actually be a parent. We should have a parent member of the board. I keep hearing my critics say, oh, well, he doesn't have a lot of experience with MCPS history. Guess what? We have a board of 7 other people, most of whom have a lot of experience with MCPS, and how'd that work out? Let's get somebody in there who has a fresh perspective, can ask the right questions, knows how to read an income statement and a balance sheet in a financial crisis, and let's see what I can do.
Well, I was told today by someone that I really respect, that I'm just simply on the wrong side of this issue. And parents continue to hear from some vocal opposition that we're just simply wrong. And they don't really tell us how we're wrong. They just point fingers and say, you're wrong. You shouldn't have this position. Shame on you. So I'd like to learn just a little bit more about you and what it is and what are your 3 main priorities should you be elected. You get through the primary, you go into the general. What are those top 3 issues that you're going to be campaigning on, aside, of course, from the neighborhood schools?
Right, this one issue, and that critics like to say you're a one-issue candidate, but that's the only issue they want to talk about. Yeah, I touched on a lot of it. I mean, at the core, the elevator pitch is I'm running to bring accountability, transparency, and true community engagement to the Board of Education. I feel like they've completely ignored that principle. They've allowed the same group that we've discussed, the loud, but I believe small activist group, to dominate the conversation around closing the achievement gap. And again, when we boil it all down, the only thing that really matters, well, 2 things. We need to be giving every kid the best education we can possibly give them, and we need to close the achievement gap. That's it. All the other stuff is important, but those are that is the primary objective of a school district. And if we're, again, evidence-based approaches to this, we have examples in our own system. Joanne Lelek is a really shining one. In this case, what did they do? Their performance was rock bottom. They had to intervene. They took the principal, Joanne Lelek. They empowered her. They empowered the teachers. They worked with the union to figure out a way to get these teachers more pay. And guess what? They had massive upticks in their performance almost immediately. And that stuff's all documented. Why are we not talking about these kinds of success stories and trying to focus on this. Now we've got an overcrowding situation and in certain schools, and that, you know, we can talk about that.
Sure.
You know, I've read the entire WXY interim report, which this is the company that was hired by the Board of Education to conduct the boundary analysis. It's not complete, but the interim report has come out. Contrary to what a lot of people think, when you look at the high schools, there are 2 high schools that have contiguous clusters that where one has overcapacity and one has undercapacity. 2, and WXY ignored all the CIP, the capital improvement projects, to expand the existing space. We're building, I mean, budget allowed with the financial crisis, but we're building 14,000 seats for students in the next 6 years, according to the plans of the CIP. We have 10,000 that are over capacity right now. So, I mean, it's almost a 1-for-1 expansion. Now, when you go to the middle schools, it's 6 schools. Okay, well, maybe we can look at some minor things, but we don't need to move kids en masse long distances to adjust that. Where some of the opportunities lie are in the elementary schools. And I think most people, because, you know, at that age, a kid is more adaptable. You're not moving them away from lifelong friends and things like that. Yeah, we can look at elementary school, and we should, because given the fact that, you know, I hope we have some time to talk about the budget. Given the fact that this CIP is going to be limited for a little while, we may have some of this capacity that takes longer to build than we thought. And we do have some overcrowded elementary schools. There's 20, I believe 25 that fit that criteria of being next, you know, overcapacity next to undercapacity. I think as long as they're in the same cluster, we should be having those conversations today. So for someone to say I'm an absolutist, I'm against moving kids anywhere. No, I mean, we can have normal, like, adult conversations about how to do that. But again, that's not how we close the achievement gap. That's how we deal with a capacity issue.
Yeah. The repeated criticisms that are out there about you is that you have right-wing connections, that you are spreading fear, that you are intentionally maligning the positions of certain candidates, and that you are unkind to the existing, I guess, education establishment, or that you don't have a lot of experience inside of our schools. You know, it's really interesting to me, and I have to bring this up in the spirit of fairness, is that, Stephen, you've been attacked for being a relative newcomer to the community, and I think you've lived here, what, 5 or 6 years?
No, a little over 4.
Okay.
Yeah, about 4.5. Let's call it.
Well, but the same people who are attacking you are openly embracing people like Brandy Brooks, who moved from Massachusetts, has limited connections to our community, and is an outspoken progressive activist. But her candidacy and her comments, no problem. Again, it's hypocrisy. It needs to be stated. You mentioned the budget. Let's talk about it. Tell me and I know it's a complex subject, but let's break down the budget in context of where we are now and with respect to COVID-19.
Sure. Well, this is a topic I've spent a lot of time on, and you know, it's a moving target because as you probably know, the fiscal year closes the end of June, and the county council is looking at things. There's a lot of discussion. It's very nebulous right now, and we don't even really fully understand what the negative impacts for the fiscal year this year are going to be. But, you know, there's predictions that the state comptroller came out with something. I think it was $2.8 billion hit to state revenues.
Yeah.
Well, what this all boils down to is when you look at the school, the funds that the school has available, there's 2 sources, and this is a little bit of a tutorial, but one of my opponents, Sunil Dasgupta, I think could actually benefit from this because I've read his website, and frankly, it's just wrong. So there's the operating budget, which is the 2.8-ish, 2.6, depends on what they end up approving, $1 billion budget. That's where all the operating funds come from. Then there's the CIP, which is where the construction and all that. But guess what? The county council issues the debt and services the debt for the CIP. So the MCPS is not on the hook for building buildings at all. Like that's just completely off, off balance sheet. So what Sunil has proposed is, hey, if we could move kids around, we could reduce the needs for building more space. And then we could use that extra debt servicing that we would have had at 8%, which he's actually wrong about that too, it's 5%. But whatever, who's counting. Move that over to the operating budget and hire more teachers. That's not how finance works, okay? Do you think the county council is, as you may recall, they almost had a debt downgrade because of some accounting shenanigans, et cetera. They are bumping up against the debt servicing limits right now, and that's before the revenue gets hit. So they already have a plan in place where over the 6 years, that's how long the CIP plan is, there's a step down function of debt issuance every year. So they were already reducing debt. If MCPS came to them and said, hey guys, you know what, we're good. We don't need to rebuild Neilsville. We don't need to rebuild Poolsville. I mean, give me a break. These places are dumps, right? I've been inside them there. Poolsville has asbestos in the ceiling. I mean, it's unbelievable. Okay, well, we don't need that money. Why don't you take the servicing that you would have had to do, but you didn't issue the debt, and move that over to our operating budget? They'd laugh you out of the room. They'd say, no, we have demands in the, because it all goes to the same place, right? It's the county. We have demands in the county. We need to build buildings. If you don't want it, we'll use it for our own buildings. That's what'll happen. It won't translate into operating budget. So Sunil doesn't know this. He's out talking about raising all these things that are going to cost a fortune. He wants to replace all the buses with electric buses. There's 1,400 buses. That'll cost, I think I did the math. It's like $200 million, $300 million. Okay, that's a great goal. I love EVs. It's awesome. But when our budget is potentially going lower, we can't afford it. So you need somebody in there that understands this, that can actually approach this like a real professional, like I am. The other thing is, I'll leave it at this, and we can go on to the next question. But it's something that I think is really important. Before I got into finance, I actually worked at a large bank, and I worked in network engineering. And it was right after the dot-com crisis. I had to. My goal was to renegotiate contracts, reduce the service costs of our telecom without impacting the service. Now, I talked to an audit firm that does this kind of work, and they also do work with benefits packages in terms of not cutting benefits, but recovering money that was spent unnecessarily, because there's actually contract agreements, and also renegotiating contracts lower. And they have 30 to 40% success rates in some cases on some of these contracts that they attack. I spoke with the executives of this company, and I forwarded their analysis to Jack Smith, the superintendent, to say, Jack, you need to be looking at this today, because we need to hit the ground running on this, because if we wait until the wave hits, it's going to be too late. And so that's a really important part of my platform. And there's nobody else on the board that has my skill set, and you're hiring a guy like me for $35,000. That's the deal of the century. Well,
you certainly have a unique background and something to offer. And there is a real statement in the fact that there's people who get onto the Board of Education, and it's not just Montgomery County, and it's all over the country, that they have no idea how to understand a statement of cash flow. They understand very little what a balance sheet looks like, or even less how to read it. And they don't understand how to read a complex operating budget or to section those out and break down the analysis. And that's what a Board of Education member, those skills are absolutely essential. And you have a background that you want to take and use directly to help the school system be more fiscally responsible, and to spend our money wisely, and to address some of the most pressing concerns. And you talked about those earlier in this interview, but there's a number of parents that are concerned, we're one of them, about the way that it seems like every opportunity that they have to upgrade, let's say Wooten High School, for example, that the facilities are lacking in multiple schools. Kids are going to school in places that are either not entirely safe or not conducive for a learning environment. And they keep pushing this off to the side and off to the side. And my daughter is in 7th grade. And by the time she gets to Wooten High School, I guarantee you they're still not going to do the necessary improvements.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, Steve. And we hear that a lot from parents.
Yeah, yeah, and it's across the spectrum, and I hear it from some of the the higher farms, the higher poverty concentrated schools as well. But seeing all sides of it, I visit schools. I've been to Neilsville, I've been to Poolesville, talked with parents. It's pretty universal, and it's kind of sad that in a school system as wealthy as what we have. I mean, the per capita income of Montgomery County is over $100,000. Why are we not able to build adequate facilities for our students? I mean,
that's a great question.
And that's a question I'll be asking when I'm sitting in there as well. I can guarantee you that. I have a lot of questions, and I want answers.
Have you gotten answers, though, from the school system? Have you found them to be responsive to your concerns? Or if you pick up the phone and dial up the administrative office or send a public information request, are you getting that information?
It's spotty. I email Dr. Smith and the board pretty frequently whenever some issue comes up. I don't know if they're nervous to respond to me because I'm however many degrees of separation from the Clarksburg case, but not directly involved, obviously. Mm-hmm. I don't get a lot of responses. But sometimes I'm surprised. I mean, there was a parent that was clearly distressed in our group that had posted something about her special needs child, and that they weren't getting adequate resources from the distance learning. And I know that's a big problem at MCPS, and that's another thing I absolutely want to address and get to the bottom of, and expand the resources when we can. I mean, immediately if possible. So I took it on myself to email the board and Dr. Smith and ask them if they could help this parent. And Dr. Smith put someone in touch with me, and they sent me some information, and I got it to the parent. So that was encouraging. So there are times when I'm surprised, but for the most part, I'd say that's 80-20. 80% of the time I hear nothing back, 20%.
Oh, well, hopefully that is improved. I'm interested to hear your take, your ideas about the response to the coronavirus and then the distance learning. Our kids are doing okay. We have good days and we have less than stellar days. And I want to give a shout out really to the teachers who are learning as we go. And it's improv. It's improv work, and they're making it work as best as they can. We have some extraordinary teachers in our school system who have been dealt a hand that just nobody would have predicted. And I have to say how impressive they are. They communicate all hours of the night, Stephen. They're talking to parents. They're helping students set up their Zooms. They're frustrated. They have their own children at home. We're figuring this out as we go. This is not just limited to MCPS or Maryland. This is a worldwide issue, and we don't have a playbook. We don't.
Yeah.
We don't have a playbook at all. But I'm interested in your perspective on how Montgomery County Public Schools has responded thus far, and the process to implement the distance learning and the virtual.
Yeah. It's a good question, and totally agree with you. I mean, teachers are our greatest asset in MCPS, and I'm a teacher's advocate, die hard. I mean, and that applies to my kids' teachers. I mean, they're fantastic, and I agree with you 100%. The communication, they do the best they can, and we're not 100%. But I know my daughter, who's in middle school, is actually doing her assignments, and my son is, in elementary, at least I've heard, There's a little more video interaction. He's doing his video interactions, and we're doing the best with what we can. And I hope that we learn a lot from this. And I can tell you one thing, knowing entrepreneurs the way that I know entrepreneurs and knowing Silicon Valley the way I know Silicon Valley, there are people today, right now, working on solutions so that this never happens again. There are already companies out there. I mean, I know one, it's called 2U, that do this at a university level. But I think going forward, I mean, this is a longer term project, but I think that MCPS really needs to completely revamp these plans, look for these kind of entrepreneurial solutions that bring a more human touch to this remote learning, more accountable touch too, because some of the problems are we can't take roll. Some kids are still have not logged on. I hope that number's gotten smaller, but we got to get people their laptops. We've got to get people their internet access. Got to make sure that that equity is being observed and everybody has an opportunity. And I think this could lead to some solutions that, going into this, I hadn't really given a lot of thought to. But if we can get these tools over however many, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, we can build out this capacity to allow students to take classes at schools that they don't even attend, right? We could eliminate the fact that, hey, there's an AP class at this one school and not at this other school. Well, let's bring the AP class to them. We don't need to put kids on a diesel engine bus to do that. If there's a teacher who's particularly good at teaching whatever subject it is, make that teacher available to kids at other schools. I mean, I'm honestly really excited because I do believe in equity. And I think that this is a much more promising potential opportunity than what we're discussing right now. I mean, this is a 21st century solution, not a 20th century solution.
Yeah, we often get lost in some of these issues, and of course, these attacks dominate. Unfortunately, this race has been distracted and pulled in many different directions, and at the heart of it, I think we've discussed very little issues, and that's why these podcasts and other media outlets are vitally important to understand who you are, how you want to accomplish it, the tools and resources that you have at your disposal, your critical thinking and analysis skills, not by the letter next to your voter registration. And it just seems like, Stephen, it seems like, well, we're not going to vote for this person, or if in conservative counties, they say, well, we can't vote for the Democrat. He or she is a Democrat. How could we possibly vote for them? They are nefarious. They're bad. They're just bad people. We're not going to vote for them. And they never take the time to fully explore the ideas. Stephen, has anybody who has been detractors of yours, really the people who are coming at you every day, have they ever said, may I call you? May we set up a meeting, a Zoom discussion now, and before COVID, a sit down over a cup of coffee, and said, I have some issues with your platform, but I really want to hear you out? Has that happened?
Maybe once, and that wasn't the initial premise. The initial premise was, hey, these attacks are getting really personal, and we should probably try to diffuse this a little bit. This was before this article came out, and I have had a phone conversation or two like that. But it's really more like, hey, you need to dial it back on this or that. It's not, hey, I want to understand what your platform is because I'm open-minded to it. I haven't had that, and there's some forums coming up. They're like in a Zoom format, and I'm hoping that we can have those conversations. And I find that when people are attacked on social media, when they're in a room with someone or in a virtual room with someone, they're a little more cordial. And so hopefully we can have an adult conversation. If there's something wrong that I believe in, I just told you pretty much everything I believe in. I'm willing to always consider another viewpoint. But again, I'm a data person through and through, and that's where this campaign comes from, and it's an inclusive campaign, and to suggest it's not is just completely ludicrous.
Well, I've seen a lot of parents who are of all ethnicities and creeds, of different income levels, different
Mhm.
education levels, every demographic have lent support to the group that you have created and to your candidacy. And it's not just you. And it extends to many of the other candidates. That I'm not saying that you're
Right.
exclusive in this either, but your point is well taken, especially when you get people into a room and there is something very different about having a phone call or a face-to-face conversation with somebody with whom you disagree rather than sitting behind a keyboard and there's a veil that allows them to say whatever they want. And
Mhm.
people like Dan Reed, I've met Dan Reed. Dan Reed's a really decent, nice guy when you meet him in person.
Sure.
And when people get behind the Twitters, it's a whole different side. Brandy Brooks, one of the biggest attack dogs in this county, has lobbed multiple accusations against people. Essentially a carpetbagger from Massachusetts, and I use that sparingly, but even still, when you see her in person, she's wonderful.
Right.
I like many of these people, and what I find distressing among this whole crowd is that many of these people, as you said, they're fundamentally really good people, but they are using social media to do the exact opposite of what they preach, in that civility, and that is open-mindedness. And to have a conversation with someone you disagree in the year 2020, or to reach out and say, I disagree with you, and let me tell you why, then is that a pastime thing? I mean, do we not do that
Good
anymore?
idea. Yeah. It's kind of like road rage, right? Like a person who's prone to road rage will flip you off, scream at you, but then they get in the elevator with you. They won't do any of that. And so it's pretty strange, really. I mean, I sat with Dan Reed and a couple of the people that are
Yeah, he's
big
a nice guy.
detractors. Nice guy, no problem. I mean, whatever. But yeah, he can really work it up on social media.
I've seen most of the people that I see who have been your core detractors, I have met or have conversed with in some format that was outside of of a smartphone. And I just don't understand that this article, really, this article that they wrote, I see people sharing it left and right. And I just think that they don't care how much they hurt you, how much the attacks are personal, how untrue it is. It's just they want to win. And if that's
Yeah.
competitiveness, then I understand that. I understand politics. I've been around it for a long time. You've been around it. But this is a nonpartisan Board of Education race where we're talking about what's best for our kids, and you have an idea for having kids go to the schools closest to them. And again, anything else other than that, I have not seen it. And
Yeah.
you've talked to me a dozen times. I've talked to other people and other candidates, and I just eventually some of us have to speak up and say, it's just not what it is. It's just
Yeah.
not what it is. And I think some of these attacks are unfortunate. So let me ask you two additional questions. The second to last question is, tell me a little bit about the other two priorities that you're looking at. What can we do immediately as a new board is sworn in and they
Mhm.
get their bearings, and there's going to be a lot of reading, there's going to be a lot of committee meetings, and you're going to get acclimated to this process. But presidents, when they take office, talk about the first 100 days. If you had first 100 days, what would be your core accomplishments? What would you want to do?
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, I think the first thing that I have to do is do my very best to build coalitions within the board. I mean, I've met a number of the board members, I've been to board meetings, I've introduced myself, and sometimes it's hard when your reputation precedes you, but I find that I think we're going to have a lot more in common than they probably believe right now. And because you can't, let's face it, as one person on a board of 8, which again, if you believe all the attacks on me, then I'm not getting anything done, because I'll come in and be like, hey, let's start segregation again. You know, like, no, you got to work with people. You've got to be a consensus builder. You've got to reach across the aisle, even though it's a nonpartisan board, or you'll never get anything accomplished. So the first goal for me is, you know, introduce the real me, who I really am and why I'm doing this, and get to know these folks. And, you know, look into, obviously we're gonna have to hit the ground running on this budget. I've told people going to the primary, yeah, this one issue candidate is all about, you know, this one issue. If this race doesn't turn into something about the budget by the time November rolls around, we're talking about the wrong thing. So when I get in there and I'm building coalitions and I'm talking to people and they see that I'm a competent financial expert, and, you know, I've got deep networks with, you know, this world, we can come up with ideas, I think, that can make this budget work, and we can achieve our goals along the way. And I think that's going to make a huge positive impact with the rest of the board, with the community as well. And so, you know, that's the main thing for me. I know a lot of people think, oh yeah, he's going to get in there and he's going to start slinging mud or whatever it is. But no, I want to build coalitions. I want to achieve the main objective of the school board, which is educate our children the best we can.
Stephen, we talked about your priorities. We talked about what you hope to accomplish and how you want to implement it. And you talked about how you would like to work together with the board members. Throughout this process, what have you learned and what could you do better?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I mean, look, I will admit, I didn't move to Montgomery County to run for political office. I have no desire to run for any other political seats beyond this. I've been a very private individual pretty much my entire adult life. Before I was doing this, I was essentially, you know, making paintings. You can probably see, that's not mine, that's one I own, but an artist that I really love and appreciate. But, you know, I was making paintings, I was doing home improvement projects. I was just being a regular guy. You know, and so this brought me, there was some rage in the community and a lot of concern. And this is the same thing that brought me into this. It brought me out of my daily life and brought me to start paying attention to the school board. Could I have done that in maybe a more you know, like friendly fence mending kind of way? Sure. You know, maybe some of the rhetoric did get a little heated from time to time. But, you know, at the end of the day, the core message hasn't changed, and I wouldn't change that at all, which is this board needs to be accountable, and we need to do the right things that have the most probability of success to educate our children and close the achievement gap. And that I stand by now and forever.
If you could say one or two things that you haven't already said tonight to the critics, what would you tell them so that they might have just a better understanding of who you are?
Well, that's a tough one, because like I told them who I am. Right. You know, I would just say, listen, guys, let's just stop the noise. Let's stop the attacks. I mean, I'm a tough person. I knew going into this that I would face some heat, and that's fine. You want to come at me any day, that's fine. But, you know, yesterday, I don't want to name names, but somebody who's a sitting office holder who knows my wife, not closely, but knows my wife, sent her an email that was frankly borderline hate mail about that he heard that I was her husband, and he also heard that I'm a vicious racist, and and I probably support the satanic Trump administration. This is a quote. Okay, this person is a officer of the Maryland Democratic Party. Okay, sending essentially hate mail to and this is a white male sending hate mail, or almost hate mail, borderline hate mail,
to your wife,
to an Asian immigrant. Okay, this should not be happening. Okay, and I'm gonna tell, if anybody's out there listening right now, stop it, because this has gone beyond road rage in your car. This is you pulling out a gun and shooting at my family. Okay, she's not political. She's not involved in this in any way. This doesn't need to involve my family, and it's disgusting. So just stop it. And I'll just leave it at that.
On this site and what we do, we fight back. And long ago when we moved here, my wife has been here a little longer than I have, and she said that sometimes she just feels like she doesn't have a voice, and then they speak her down. They shout her down. And when we got married, and we're sort of the perfect couple for one another, because we complement each other in many different ways. And my wife is ferocious. I would never think to cross her. And I said, every once in a while, it's okay to pick and choose your battles. In fact, I've learned that in my life, and that has been an educational journey for me. But every once in a while, you have to stand up and say, this is unacceptable. We are adults, and we're not going to take for these attacks. And sometimes you have to push back. And sometimes you just have to come back and start swinging. And I hate to say it like that, but, when you get your character attacked, when people send messages to your wife, and I don't know how that they would have found her contact information, but no less, that is out of line. It is unacceptable to cross that line. And they may disagree with your policies or your personal agenda of how you want to, or the vehicle of which you want to arrive at the ultimate mission. But leave our families alone.
Yeah. Send an email to me. I'll have a conversation with you anytime.
It is just borderline. It is absolutely unacceptable. And I've had it happen to me before. People have attacked me personally. They've attacked my family. They've called up my employer. They have done so many things to me, and it's like I'm used to it by now, and I'm okay with it because I have thick skin, and I know it takes incredible thick skin to run in this county, because you're up against a machine that is led by a core group of about 100 people. And if they don't like you, and if you are on the outs of that they will do everything that they can to stop you. And if they see you as impeding their goals, then they're going to come at you. They're going to use every playbook possible. So I appreciate you coming on a Sunday night. We talked about a lot of core issues to your candidacy, and I appreciate you addressing an uncomfortable topic like the Maryland Matters opinion piece, the guest commentary by David, the One Maryland or One Montgomery group. And really, look, they really should disclose who they're supporting in this article. I thought that was a bit unfortunate, and I had not known that. But if they are going to, if people, and if candidates want to go on the attack, and if people like Eric Lukey wants to go on the attack, then he should say that he's supporting Lynn Harris. Right? He should say that that Lynn Harris held a fundraiser for him, or was on his host committee, or whatever you want to call it, a couple of years ago. Yeah. Disclosure and transparency is vital. And if One Montgomery is backing Dr. Dasgupta, then that's fine. They are entitled to do whatever they want. And I've met most of these candidates, and they're truly wonderful people. Every experience that I've had interviewing them, I have learned something so fascinating and new. There's some really quality candidates in this race, and we're paying careful attention in my family. And Stephen, I appreciate it. You're a stand-up guy. you came on tonight, and these are not easy questions, and addressing these issues, it's difficult because it is personal. And I wanted to give you a fair shake and the opportunity to respond uninhibited and free of any distraction. So thank you for coming on tonight. And on another note, are you working from home? Are you pretty much sequestered and sticking to your house?
Yeah, I'm working from home. I built out a pretty nice workspace, so run the campaign from there, and work my day job still from there as well, and do the same thing everybody else is doing. Try to get the kids focused, keep them away from the screens when they're not studying, and just trying to run this campaign. So we'll see. We'll know soon enough. I mean, we're in the final stretch, and I think we're probably going to have two waves. You'll have the people that get their envelopes and vote immediately, and you'll have people that wait till the last minute. And we're going to have our foot on the accelerator the entire time. And my team and I are, this noise to us is a distraction, and we want to stay focused on the real issues, the real campaign, and that's what we'll be doing. So,
well,
appreciate the time.
I appreciate your time. There's nothing more important than cultivating a better system for our kids to become quality, adjusted, functioning adults in our society. And it all starts at home with our education system inside of our communities. And that's what it's really all about. Anybody who puts their name on a ballot, I give them a lot of credit. It's not easy to do that, especially in a community that it's tough. And look, Montgomery County, for what as you know, it's a well-educated bunch. They do their homework to their credit. And I've always appreciated that. But again, let's stick to the issues. Let's not write any more of these goofy letter to the editors or these opinion pieces where you have half of the Democratic progressive establishment sharing and then basically drawing horns on you back in middle school. And it's just let's just get back to the issues. Let's do that. Stephen, thank you for joining us. Oh, and please plug your website.
Yes, Stephen with a PH, Austin, Stephen Austin, the number 4, BOE.com. That's my campaign site. There's a donation link, of course. And Montgomery County MD Neighbors for Local Schools. It's a private Facebook group, but we do allow people to join. Just be respectful, and that's it.
All right. Well, Stephen Austin, an at-large candidate for the Montgomery County Board of Education. Thanks for coming on the podcast tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you for hosting me. I appreciate it, Ryan.
You bet.